Picture this. It is the second week of January. You are sitting at your desk, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, and you're looking at this pristine, neatly formatted list of annual goals.
That's a classic New Year's resolution list. We've all been there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to launch that massive new project, or maybe get in the absolute best shape of your life, maybe even double your department's revenue. And as you look at the calendar, you just feel this massive, comforting, expansive time.
12 whole months.
Yeah, 12 months. It feels infinite. So, if you skip a workout today or put off that really incredibly intimidating client call until next week, well, it doesn't really matter. You have plenty of time.
You just coast.
You coast. But then you blink, and suddenly it is the second week of November. And that comforting, expansive time, it has completely evaporated.
That is when the inevitable December panic sets in.
Oh, absolutely. And somehow, miraculously, your productivity just spikes to supernatural levels. I mean, you close deals, you finish projects, you basically do more in those final 60 days than you did in the previous 6 months combined.
It's wild. But it is actually a universally observable human phenomenon. We track this exact behavioral pattern in enterprise sales teams, in personal fitness data, and even in corporate project management.
So it's not just a lack of discipline.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Humans are just biologically wired to respond to imminent constraints, not abstract horizons.
You're listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking. Today, our deep dive focuses on Brian Moran and Michael Lennington's book, The 12-Week Year, alongside, our extensive research into the behavioral science of goal execution.
And our mission today is very specific. We want to help you shortcut the knowing-doing gap.
Right, because we are going to explore how you can harness that supernatural end of your hustle all year round. And this is the really crucial part, without the burnout.
Yeah, because the burnout is the natural enemy of high performance. You can't just white-knuckle it forever.
Yeah.
To sustain that December intensity, the framework we are analyzing today completely redefines what a year actually is.
Both structurally and psychologically, right?
Exactly.
So, if the goal is to replicate the urgency of a December panic without living in a constant, sweat-inducing state of anxiety, the authors suggest we stop thinking in terms of 12 months entirely. We have to violently compress the timeline.
We basically treat 12 weeks as if it were a full calendar year.
Just 12 weeks. And the underlying science of why this works, it comes down to temporal motivation theory, right?
Yeah, temporal motivation theory. It basically explains why immediate deadlines trigger action and why distant deadlines just completely fail us. I mean, the human brain is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, but
it has some quirks.
To put it mildly, it has some very specific, often frustrating quirks when it comes to perceiving time. Your limbic system, which is the emotional and motivational center of your brain, it simply does not register distant threats or distant rewards.
So it essentially lives entirely in the now.
Exactly. It only understands the immediate environment. Now, your prefrontal cortex, which handles all your logic and complex future planning, it is constantly trying to tell the limbic system that a massive goal 12 months away is important.
Like, hey, we need to save for retirement, or we need to write this book.
Right, but the limbic system basically processes that 12-month goal as a fictional story. It just does not feel real.
There's no motivational heat attached to it.
None at all.
Yeah.
However, when you compress your execution window from 12 months down to just 12 weeks, the deadline suddenly crosses this neurological threshold.
Oh, so it becomes real to the limbic system.
Yes. It is suddenly near enough that the limbic system stays highly activated from day one.
Because every single week now represents roughly a month of a traditional year. I mean, you can't just coast for a single week, because mathematically that would be like throwing away an entire month of your year.
Which is terrifying, but highly motivating.
Definitely. And I assume this ties directly into Parkinson's law, but perhaps with a different application than we usually see. Our audience knows Parkinson's law, that work expands to fill the time allotted for it. But how does a 12-month horizon actively sabotage us here?
Well, a 12-month timeline structurally encourages what behavioral psychologists call unproductive elaboration.
Unproductive elaboration.
Yeah. When you have a vast amount of time, the cognitive friction of actually doing the hard, scary work pushes you towards softer tasks. Like, you overthink, you endlessly revise things that really do not need revising.
Oh, I do this all the time. You schedule unnecessary alignment meetings to talk about the work instead of just executing the work.
Exactly. Because planning feels like progress, but it is often just a sophisticated stalling tactic.
Okay, let's unpack this. I have to pause and push back on this premise just a bit. If we remove that cognitive buffer and compress everything into 12 weeks, doesn't this just mean we're supposed to live in a perpetual redlining state of stress?
I hear that a lot.
Because forcing myself through 4 December panics every single year sounds fundamentally exhausting. I mean, I can feel my cortisol spiking just imagining it.
Yeah, that is honestly the most common critique of short-term execution models. But the data tells a very different story.
Really?
The framework actually prevents chronic stress because it maps perfectly to the emotional cycle of change. Whenever you try to establish any new habit or execute a major project, you move through 5 distinct psychological stages.
Okay, what's the first one?
You start with informed optimism. You're excited, your motivation is high, you bought the new running shoes, you mapped out the business plan.
Right, everything is great.
But then, as the actual friction of the work begins, you drop into the second stage, which is informed pessimism.
The honeymoon phase completely shatters.
Completely. And that shattering leads you into the critical third stage, the valley of despair.
The valley of despair. That sounds lovely.
It is brutal. In a 12-week cycle, this danger zone reliably hits around week 4 to week 6. The emotional cost of doing the work is at its absolute highest, but the tangible results are still nowhere to be seen.
And this delay, this is what the behavioral research refers to as the latency gap, right?
Exactly. The latency gap is the biological delay between your daily effort and your physical or financial outcome. Think about it mechanically.
Okay.
You are making 50 cold calls a day, or, you are eating perfectly clean macros. But the massive sales contract hasn't been signed yet, and your body composition hasn't visibly changed.
So you look in the mirror and nothing is happening.
Right. And your brain vehemently rejects this state. It feels like you are burning precious metabolic energy for absolutely zero reward.
So the brain is just desperately looking for a way out of the discomfort. According to our research, there is this fascinating defense mechanism where, during the valley of despair, instead of pushing through the actual difficult work, people suddenly decide they need to rewrite their goals.
Oh, they want to completely re-strategize.
Yes. Because, like we mentioned earlier, planning carries very low cognitive friction. It feels highly productive, but it is actually a retreat.
It's an escape hatch.
Totally. Take Marcus, one of the startup founders from the case studies we reviewed. He hit week 5, the latency gap was peaking, revenue hadn't moved at all, and his immediate instinct was to pivot his entire product line.
Right, because if Marcus abandons the execution to go rewrite the goals, he bounces himself all the way back to informed optimism.
A new plan feels great in the moment.
It does. But if he does that, he never actually reaches the final 2 stages of the cycle.
Which are?
Hopeful realism, where the delayed results finally start to compound, and then ultimately, completion. Fortunately, Marcus stayed the course. He forced himself through the latency gap without changing the plan, and he eventually achieved a 15% revenue increase by week 11.
Wow. By week 11. So, to survive this valley of despair without bailing out or retreating to the whiteboard, you really need a serious anchor. Which brings us to a massive paradox in Brian Moran and Michael Lennington's book.
A paradox.
Yeah. They argue that a hyper-focused short-term execution system actually requires a deeply emotional long-term vision. I mean, why on earth are we supposed to spend time mapping out a 10-year life vision if the entire premise of the system is that we're only executing in 12-week bursts?
Because execution without direction is just chaotic motion. When you are deep in the valley of despair at week 5 and your alarm goes off at 5 a.m., a 12-week plan alone is just a sterile list of burdens.
It's basically a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And spreadsheets do not generate the emotional wattage required to get a human being out of a warm bed at 5 a.m. You need a vision that connects the immediate action to your core identity.
I was digging into the neuroscience backing this up, specifically the research from Hal Hirschfield at UCLA. He used functional MRI scans to look at how our brains process time and identity, and the mechanics are wild.
Oh, his research is fascinating.
It really is. They found that when you think about your present self, certain regions of your brain light up, but when you are asked to think about your future self, like the you of 10 years from now, those regions literally go dark.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, instead, the brain activity looks identical to how it lights up when you think about a total stranger.
The implications of that are profound, because if you aren't actively and emotionally tethered to a vivid vision of your future self, your brain literally treats that future version of you like a random person on the street.
Like a stranger.
Right. And humans are biologically unwilling to make significant, painful daily sacrifices for a stranger.
That makes so much sense. I mean, asking Present Me to skip a warm donut so that stranger me can be healthy in a decade is a losing battle every single time.
Exactly. The vision bridges that neurological gap. It makes the daily grind identity-based. When your 12-week goals are tied to a deep, visceral vision, completing your daily tasks stops being a chore and becomes a self-affirming act.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This identity-level execution leads to a highly controversial element within the 12-week framework. To achieve this level of focus, the authors advocate for completely rejecting the modern myth of work-life balance.
Which is tough for a lot of people to hear.
Oh, for sure. I see this constantly in corporate wellness seminars. They preach balance as this ultimate utopia. But trying to perfectly balance your career, your fitness, your marriage, your hobbies, and your community service all at the exact same time, it's a recipe for disaster.
You end up spreading yourself way too thin.
Like peanut butter on a giant piece of bread. Let me offer a different way to look at it. Traditional balance is like trying to grow 5 different high-yield crops in the exact same field simultaneously, year after year.
The soil just gets completely depleted.
Yes, and you end up with stunted, mediocre harvests across the board. Instead, the book advocates for intentional imbalance, which is much more like crop rotation.
I love that analogy. Intentional imbalance means you consciously accept that extraordinary outcomes require concentrated, asymmetric focus.
So for a specific 12-week cycle, what does that look like?
Well, you might choose to over-index heavily on just 2 areas. Perhaps a massive career launch and your physical fitness.
And you deliberately put everything else, the hobbies, the massive home renovation, on baseline maintenance.
You let those fields lie fallow.
Right. You give yourself psychological permission to not be perfectly balanced for 12 weeks, knowing that in the next cycle, you can rotate, you can shift your focus and over-index on your family or your personal development.
It systematically removes the guilt of not being everything to everyone all the time. It creates sequential harmony rather than simultaneous compromise.
Sequential harmony, that's a great way to put it.
But we really have to address the mechanics of execution. With a vision fueling you and the freedom of intentional imbalance, how are you actually measuring the daily work to ensure you are moving forward?
We have to talk about scorekeeping. The primary reason people fail is that they measure the wrong end of the process. They obsess over lag indicators.
Lag indicators.
Yeah, a lag indicator is an outcome you cannot directly control. Revenue is a lag indicator. Weight loss is a lag indicator.
And the mechanical flaw of a lag indicator is that by the time you can actually measure it, the behavior that caused it is entirely in the past. It is a retroactive signal.
Right. If you realize in week 10 that you are 20% behind on your sales target, well, you cannot time travel back to week 3 to make more phone calls.
Exactly. So the framework entirely shifts the focus to lead indicators.
Lead indicator.
Yes. A lead indicator is a forward-looking, highly controllable behavior. Things like making 50 prospecting calls before noon, or working out for 45 minutes, or writing 2,000 words.
Things you can actually sit down and just do.
Precisely. The execution system relies on a weekly scorecard composed entirely of these lead indicators. And the scoring is brutally simple. It is binary. You either completed the behavior or you didn't.
So 1 for done, 0 for not done.
Right. There is absolutely no partial credit for effort.
The magic number here is the 85% execution threshold. The data shows that if you hit 85% on your scorecard for your lead indicators, the mathematical probability is that the lag indicators will eventually follow.
They almost always do.
So what does this all mean? I mean, I understand the 85% rule, but how does a listener whose calendar is an absolute war zone of incoming emails, Slack messages, and unannounced meetings actually defend the time to hit that score?
Well, you cannot just hope to find the time. You have to aggressively operationalize your calendar using what the authors call the model week.
The model week.
Right. A strategic plan without violently protected time blocks is really just an illusion. The framework mandates 3 non-negotiable types of time blocks.
The first one is the fortress, right? Strategic block.
Yes, the strategic block. This is a 3-hour window of completely uninterrupted deep work. No emails, no calls, no quick questions from colleagues. You are executing only the highest leverage lead indicators on your scorecard.
Because cognitive research shows it takes genuine, sustained attention to overcome task-switching friction and achieve high-quality cognitive traction.
You simply cannot do deep strategic architectural work in 15-minute increments between Zoom calls.
It's impossible, but the chaos still exists. The emails still pile up while you're in that block.
True. That is where block number 2 comes in buffer blocks. These are 30 to 60 minutes of batch time, usually once or twice a day, purely designed to handle the low-value reactive work.
So that's when you process all your emails, return the voicemails, sign the forms.
Exactly. You corral the chaos into a specific pen so it cannot bleed into your strategic block.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur Nate Lauer used this exact method. By aggressively batching his admin into buffer blocks, he reclaimed 10 hours a week.
10 hours? That's incredible.
And because he wasn't constantly distracted, he increased his sales by 30%.
Wow. Which brings us to the third block, and ironically, the one high achievers resist the absolute most. Breakout blocks.
Oh, people hate scheduling these.
Yep. They really do. But it's a minimum of 3 hours of pure leisure scheduled deliberately during normal business hours. No work thoughts, no professional reading, just complete disengagement.
It is essential.
I see the immediate overlap here with Paul Graham's essay on the maker versus manager schedule. Managers operate on an agenda of 1-hour blocks, status meetings, check-ins, approvals. But makers, the writers, coders, and strategists, they need half a day of unbroken time just to get into the flow state.
And the friction happens when you try to force a maker into a manager's cadence.
Exactly. So the model week essentially gives you the tools to survive both. Your strategic blocks act as a protected maker island right in the middle of a chaotic manager ocean.
And the breakout block ensures the cognitive machinery doesn't overheat. The human nervous system requires periods of complete disengagement to consolidate learning and recover executive function.
Because if you ignore the breakout block and just grind relentlessly, you experience rapid diminishing returns.
And eventually, total performance degradation.
Wait, so after demanding that I redline my focus, maintain intentional imbalance, and aggressively track every lead indicator to hit an 85% score for nearly 3 straight months, this system actually mandates that I stop working.
Yes.
What happens on day 85?
You implement a structural reset. Within the framework, this is known as the 13th week.
The 13th week.
Right. If we borrow a concept from elite athletic periodization, the 13th week functions exactly like a physiological deload week. Olympic weightlifters push progressively harder for several weeks, deliberately accumulating fatigue, but then they dramatically drop the volume and intensity.
But the actual muscle growth and neural adaptation happen during the recovery phase, not the training phase?
It is the exact same mechanism for professional and cognitive performance. The 13th week is an off-cycle week. You review your past scorecard honestly, but entirely without self-punishment.
So no beating yourself up?
No. If you miss goals, you just diagnose the mechanics. Was the lead indicator too ambitious? Did you let your buffer blocks consume your strategic blocks?
You process the misses objectively.
Yes, but equally importantly, you celebrate the wins to solidify that new identity we talked about earlier.
Acknowledging what you achieved reinforces your identity as a highly capable performer. It makes the initiation of the next 12-week cycle feel like a continuation of momentum rather than, a brand new, exhausting burden.
Precise.
Now, for anyone listening who is thinking, well, this periodization sounds incredible for massive goals, but I have a hurricane of tiny administrative tasks suffocating me right now, the research provides a really elegant synthesis.
You can integrate this perfectly with David Allen's Getting Things Done or the GTD system.
Let's walk through a tangible example. Imagine a listener staring at an inbox with 400 unread messages and a notebook full of just random ideas.
The friction there is cognitive overload. GTD is phenomenal at capturing and categorizing all of those reactive inputs. It provides the mechanism to get every task out of your brain and into a trusted system.
Right. GTD gives you the 2-minute rule to clear the absolute junk, and it catalogs everything else. But GTD will happily organize your grocery list right next to your massive career pivot.
It lacks a prioritization engine.
Exactly. So you use GTD as the sweeping capture net. But when you sit down for your Monday morning planning session, you run that massive GTD list through the filter of your 12-week framework.
Right. Only the tasks that directly serve your lead indicators are allowed into your 3-hour strategic blocks. The rest gets pushed to buffer blocks or deleted entirely.
They map perfectly to each other. GTD provides the clarity, but the 12-week system provides the velocity.
And the velocity is real. The proof in the case studies goes far beyond theory. Let's look at Ann Laufman, a financial advisor we researched.
Oh, her story is amazing.
She didn't change her target demographic. She didn't magically invent a new financial product. She focused purely on compressing her timeline and executing lead indicators using this exact system.
And the results?
She saw a 400% increase in her output and became the #1 associate in the entire history of her firm.
The data just consistently validates this. By eliminating the complacency that an annual horizon inevitably breeds and shifting focus entirely to controllable inputs, the compound results scale exponentially.
Absolutely.
So let's bring it all together for the listener. In today's world, we do not need more time. Everyone is desperately searching for a secret 25th hour in the day, but what we actually need are impenetrable boundaries and a much closer deadline.
Without a doubt.
By treating every 12 weeks as a full year, by relentlessly measuring lead indicators on a binary scorecard, and by taking that crucial 13th week to let the cognitive soil recover, we can finally close the knowing-doing gap.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over as you look at your own ambitions. We so often internalize our failures. We blame ourselves when we fall short of a massive goal.
Right, we blame a lack of discipline, a lack of willpower, or just a lack of inherent talent.
But what if the real reason you haven't achieved that intimidating goal has nothing to do with your capability? What if the only problem is simply that your timeline is too long? Imagine what your life, your career, and your health would fundamentally look like if you genuinely treated the next 12 weeks as your entire year.
Imagine sitting at your desk in January, looking at the calendar, and feeling that sharp, exhilarating focus of a December deadline, right here, right now. If this deep dive resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support the show.